All right, so today we're diving deep into something I think we can all relate to.
Oh, yeah.
Those awkward moments we all experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
But hey, don't worry, we're not here to just relive the pain.
No, not at all.
We're going to equip you with the tools to handle those situations like a pro, and maybe even laugh along the way.
I like that.
And to help us break this down, we've got an expert in social dynamics and communication.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting to see how these little moments can tell us so much about ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, imagine this. You're at a networking event,
Okay.
feeling great, exchanging cards, and then boom,
Uh-oh.
your mind goes blank. You've completely forgotten the name of the person right in front of you.
Oh, the worst.
The worst. So we're going to dive into not just how to survive these situations, but really how to turn them around.
Exactly. And it's about understanding the psychology behind it and using that to connect with people.
Okay, I love that. So in our research, we came across these 3 phrases that are kind of like secret weapons.
Oh, tell me more.
For these awkward situations, it slipped my mind, I'm terrible with, and I'm in a bit of a hurry. What do you think about these? Do they actually work?
They're pretty clever, actually. It slipped my mind puts the blame on forgetfulness, which we can all relate to.
Right.
It makes the other person feel more at ease.
Yeah, it's like, hey, it happens.
Exactly. Then there's I'm terrible with. And this one uses humor. It disarms the situation because you're not taking yourself too seriously.
Yeah. Like those comedians that make fun of themselves.
Right.
They seem so much more likable.
Exactly. And that's the power of humor. When you admit a weakness with a little bit of a chuckle, you come across as much more approachable.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then there's I'm in a bit of a hurry, and that's less about the blame and more like an exit strategy.
It is. You're setting a time limit so you don't feel trapped.
Perfect. So we've got the phrases. Now, in our research, we found this little skit, and it's like a comedy routine almost.
Yeah.
Showing how this could actually play out. So there's these 2 colleagues, and they bump into each other.
Okay.
One of them's clearly in a rush. The other one's struggling with names.
Oh, I've been there.
I've all been there. So one of them, Sarah, is totally blanking on this guy's name.
Oh, no.
And you know that silence where you're desperately searching?
Oh, it's the worst.
And she finally just says, I'm so sorry. Your name has completely slipped my mind. Could you remind me?
And there's our first phrase. And she phrases it like a request, which takes the pressure off of the other person.
Oh, that's a good point. And then David, he just laughs it off.
Okay.
He says, no worries, it happens to the best of us. I'm David. And then Sarah uses the second phrase, I'm terrible with names, especially when I'm in a rush.
Oh, she combined 2. That's good.
She combined 2. She's like, see ya.
She's acknowledging that she needs to go and kind of steering the conversation to a close.
Yeah, and it doesn't come off rude at all.
It doesn't.
Because she remembers his name. She says, David. Right. Okay, I'll make a mental note this time. It was great seeing you, but I'm actually running a bit late for a meeting. Catch you later.
See, she repeated the name and then used the in a hurry phrase, and it's done.
So smooth. It's amazing how those little phrases can be so powerful.
Right, when you use them strategically.
Yeah. You acknowledge the awkwardness, but you don't dwell on it.
You just move on.
And this kind of reminds me of another point that we came across. It was about repeating someone's name when you first meet them
Okay, interesting.
to try to prevent that awkwardness from happening in the first place.
That makes sense.
Do you think that actually works?
Absolutely. Repetition is a classic memory technique.
Okay, so tell me about the science behind this.
So when you learn something new, like a name, it goes into your short-term memory,
Right.
but it fades quickly unless you reinforce it.
Okay.
Repeating it helps move it to your long-term memory.
Oh, so it's like building a stronger path in your brain to make it easier to recall later.
Exactly. It strengthens that connection.
I like that. That's a good way to think about it. So it's a simple thing, but it can really help you avoid those awkward name forgetting moments.
It can.
But, sometimes it's not just a name. What about those times where you totally mess up?
Oh, yeah.
You say something you shouldn't have.
Well, that's where self-confidence comes in.
Okay.
You have to be able to laugh at yourself and use humor to kind of diffuse the tension.
So it's not just avoiding the awkwardness. It's about having the confidence to handle it when it does happen.
Exactly.
I like that.
Think about it. Some of the funniest stories we tell are about the times when things went wrong.
Okay, yeah, like those you had to be there moments that just make you laugh until you cry.
Right. And those often involve some level of awkwardness.
Yeah, they do. So how does laughing at yourself actually help?
It creates distance from the awkwardness.
Okay.
So you're stepping outside yourself and looking at it with amusement.
And it takes away some of that embarrassment.
Yeah.
Right.
It does. It does. Laughter also releases endorphins.
Oh, interesting.
Those are your natural mood boosters.
So it's not just in your head. It's like a physical reaction, too.
It is. It is.
Okay. But there's something else, too, that I think is really important.
What's that?
Self-compassion.
Oh, absolutely.
We can talk about techniques and stuff, but sometimes you just need to cut yourself some slack.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, we're all human.
We are.
We all mess up, and it's okay.
Exactly. You deserve the same kindness you would give to a friend.
So instead of beating yourself up over it,
Yeah.
just see it as a learning opportunity.
Absolutely.
A chance to practice and become more resilient.
Think about it. How would you advise a friend? That's how you should talk to yourself.
I love that. So it's about owning it, learning from it,
Yeah.
and moving on with a little bit of grace and humor.
Exactly. Exactly. And remember, awkwardness doesn't define you.
Right.
It's just a moment in time.
I like that. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So as we continue this deep dive,
Yeah.
just remember, awkwardness isn't something to be feared.
Right?
It's part of being human.
It is.
And it can actually be a chance for growth
And even some laughs.
and even some laughs. So instead of dreading those moments,
Yeah.
maybe we can look at them as opportunities to connect
I love that.
and even find some humor.
Absolutely.
Now that brings us to this interesting connection between awkwardness and humor.
It is a fascinating dynamic, isn't it?
It is. Why is it that those cringeworthy moments make the best stories?
I think it's because awkwardness and humor are two sides of the same coin.
Okay.
It just depends on how we choose to see it.
So it's all about our perception.
Exactly.
It's like in those sitcoms where something embarrassing happens.
Yes.
And there's that moment of stunned silence before everyone bursts out laughing.
Right. And humor lets us step outside of the awkwardness and just find the funny.
And sometimes that shared laughter is what makes it a memory.
It does.
It becomes a story that we tell and retell.
And we bond over it?
Yeah, like, oh my gosh, remember that time? when...
Exactly.
And it's like, we're saying it's okay.
We all do it.
We've all been there.
We've all been there.
That's reassuring, right?
Absolutely. It reminds us that we're not alone.
Yeah, exactly. And those embarrassing moments are what make us relatable.
And endearing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about embracing our imperfections.
Yes. And finding the humor in those moments.
Okay, so how do we get better at finding that humor?
I think it starts with self-awareness.
Okay.
You have to be mindful of your own reactions.
So what do you do when you get flustered?
Right. Do you freeze up? Knowing your patterns helps you anticipate and prepare your response.
Like, I know when I'm nervous, I start to ramble.
Okay.
And that can lead to these awkward tangents.
I see. So maybe have a few phrases ready to transition smoothly,
Oh, that's good.
like speaking of which, or this reminds me of.
Okay, yeah. Give yourself a moment to reset.
Exactly.
That's a great tip. But what about those situations where it's not even you? What if it's someone else is making it awkward?
That is a whole other dynamic, and it requires a different approach.
Okay, so how do we navigate those situations where someone else drops the ball?
Well, that is a topic for part 2 of our deep dive.
Oh, a cliffhanger.
A cliffhanger. We're going to explore those secondhand awkward situations.
From the subtle faux pas.
to the truly cringeworthy.
All right, so stay tuned, listeners.
We'll be right back with more tips and tricks to help you become a master of awkwardness.
See you soon.
Bye. Welcome back. So we left off talking about those awkward situations created by someone else.
Yeah, like sometimes it feels like there's nothing you can do. You're just stuck there.
You know it can feel that way. But remember, awkwardness is often about perception. Just because they feel awkward doesn't mean you have to.
Oh, so it's like their awkwardness is contagious or something.
Kind of, but you can build immunity.
Okay, I'm listening. How do we do that?
One way is by redirecting the conversation. Think of yourself as a DJ.
Okay, I like where this is going.
You're smoothly transitioning away from that awkward track.
Give me some DJ moves.
Okay, so let's say someone makes a joke and it just totally bombs.
The worst.
Instead of that awkward silence, jump in with a new topic, something related but safer.
Okay, so like, speaking of humor, I heard this funny story the other day.
Exactly. You acknowledge the attempt at humor without dwelling on the bad joke.
It's like you're saying, hey, nice try, but moving on.
Exactly. You're gently steering the conversation.
Okay, but what about those situations where it's not really what they're saying, it's more like how they're acting?
Oh, you mean like the phone checker?
Yes, or the person who just never stops talking.
Right. Body language plays a huge role in those situations.
Okay, so how do we deal with that?
With the phone person, Try making eye contact with someone else.
Ah, so you're kind of sending a signal without actually saying anything.
Exactly. For the nonstop talker, try a gentle interjection.
So like, oh, that reminds me of.
Exactly. Create a little pause and reclaim some of that conversation space.
So it's like you're being assertive, but not aggressive.
Right. You don't want to make them feel worse.
Okay, these are good tips. But sometimes there are those moments where it just feels like there's no recovering.
The true cringe moments.
Yes, like when someone spills their drink all over themselves, or even worse, all over you.
Okay, in those moments, practicality comes first.
Okay, so less about the social graces.
Right. If it's a spill, focus on damage control.
So you're saying like, don't worry, let me grab you a napkin.
Exactly. Downplay the severity.
Huh.
And your reaction will set the tone for everyone else.
That's so true. Like if you freak out, everyone else will too.
Right. So having a go-to response can really help.
It's like an emergency plan for awkwardness.
I like that. And it can be adapted to any situation.
So I'm curious, are there ways to actually prevent some of these situations from happening?
That's a great question. And it goes back to self-awareness, not just of yourself, but of the people you're with.
So like paying attention to those little social cues.
Exactly. It's called emotional intelligence.
Oh, right. I've heard of that.
It's all about being perceptive to what's going on in the situation.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine you're at a party and you see someone standing alone looking a bit lost.
Okay, yeah.
Instead of letting them stay in that awkward situation, approach them.
Oh, so you're preventing the awkwardness from even happening.
Exactly. You're being proactive.
Okay, I see. But what about those situations where you can't control the environment or the people?
Like at work, for example.
Yeah, work can be a minefield.
It can be. So in those cases, boundaries are important.
What do you mean by boundaries at work?
Well, let's say a coworker is oversharing personal stuff.
Yeah, happens all the time.
You can politely steer them back to work topics.
Okay, so not being rude, just setting some limits.
Exactly. And those boundaries are also about respecting other people's boundaries too.
Oh, that's a good point.
Sometimes people don't even realize they're making others uncomfortable.
It's true. And that can lead to a whole lot of awkwardness.
It can. So being mindful and setting boundaries creates a more respectful environment.
So preventing awkwardness is really about being considerate of others too.
It is. We're all in this together, and a little kindness goes a long way.
And don't forget about humor.
Of course. Finding a way to laugh can really lighten the mood.
Okay, so it's not about avoiding awkwardness altogether. It's about learning how to handle it.
With grace and a bit of humor.
Now, we've talked a lot about reacting to awkwardness, but I want to know, why do we find certain things awkward in the first place?
That's a great question. And that takes us into the psychology of awkwardness.
Ooh, let's get into it. All right, so we're back and ready to unpack the big question.
Okay.
Why do certain things make us feel so awkward?
Well, it's not just about the situation itself, it's about how we see it.
Right, right.
And that perception is influenced by a lot of things, like how we were raised,
Okay.
cultural norms, and even our own insecurities.
So there's this whole other layer to it.
There is. Think about what's considered awkward in one culture
Yeah.
might be totally normal in another.
Oh, that's so true. Like I've heard about cultures where booping after a meal is a good thing.
Right.
But can you imagine that happening here?
Oh, that would be awkward.
Super awkward. So cultural norms play a big role.
They do. They dictate what's appropriate.
And when we break those norms,
That's when the awkwardness sets in.
it's like we've got these unwritten rules.
We do. And we learn them through observation.
So we might not even realize we're following them
Exactly.
until we break one.
Right. And those rules can be different depending on your age, gender, where you live, all sorts of things.
It makes me think about being a teenager.
Oh, yeah.
You're so worried about fitting in.
Absolutely. You're constantly second-guessing yourself.
Yeah, like walking on eggshells.
And that comes from wanting to belong.
Right, to be accepted.
Exactly. So awkwardness is kind of a sign that we care what other people think.
Okay, that's interesting. But why does it feel so bad?
Because it triggers a physical response.
Really?
Yeah, our heart rate goes up.
Okay.
We might sweat.
Oh, yeah. I've been there.
It's like a signal that something's wrong.
So like a fight or flight response, but for social situations.
Exactly. It's like a leftover from our caveman days.
Oh, wow.
Back then, being excluded from the group could be dangerous.
Right.
So our brains are still wired that way.
So even though we know it's not a life or death situation, it feels like it.
It can feel that way, yeah.
This is blowing my mind. awkwardness is so much deeper than I thought.
It is. It is.
But if we understand it, maybe we can handle it better.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that it's normal,
Okay.
even healthy.
So it's not about getting rid of awkwardness altogether.
No, not at all.
It's about learning how to deal with it.
And remember, a little awkwardness can be a good thing.
Really?
Yeah, it shows you're human.
Okay.
You're willing to be vulnerable.
I like that.
It means you don't take yourself too seriously.
This has been so eye-opening. Next time I feel awkward, I'm going to remember it's just my caveman brain freaking out,
That's a good way to think about it.
and that it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Absolutely. And remember, humor can be a great antidote.
Oh, for sure.
A little laughter can go a long way.
This deep dive has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
It's been my pleasure. And listeners, remember, awkwardness is universal.
Right.
And those moments can actually lead to strong connections.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So embrace those awkward moments. Find the humor in them. And remember, you're not alone.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the art of awkwardness.
Thanks for having me.
And until next time, keep laughing, keep learning, and keep embracing the awkwardness of being human.